Joining us now is Chris Mannix, writer for Sports Illustrated, who has been following and reporting on the Boston Celtics for a long, long time. He's also the host of the crossover NBA show. Chris, welcome to Takeline.
Thanks for having me.
Chris, Golden State 107, Celtics 88, Game 2. The Warriors really upped the level of physicality. Turnover battle was pretty decisive in this one, much like the Miami series. What's the mood around the Celtics after Game 2?
I mean, look, disappointed for sure. I think there were a lot of people there that believed they had a legitimate chance of taking 2 in Golden State after that first one. And, the way the game started, it sure looked like they were going to be in that position. They were flying around defensively, making shots. Jaylen Brown got hot right off the bat. But these third quarters, we need like a deep study on why the Celtics, why they can't get anything going in the third quarter. I mean, this is a relatively new phenomena for Boston. Mm-hmm. Like in the regular season, they were actually like plus 2.7 in the third quarter. In the playoffs, in the totality of it, they're minus, but they're like minus 0.08. But like, look at some of these clunkers, whether it was the third quarter of, Game 3 of the conference semis against Milwaukee, where they had the doors blown off, Game 1 against Miami, and then these last two, like it's just inexplicable. Like, you almost want Ime Udoka to go way outside the box and be like, guys, instead of going into halftime to make adjustments, we're going to watch CeeLo Green perform and see what's happening and see how that goes and just forget everything else because it's not working. Like, they're coming out completely flat and they're getting blown out. I mean, they were able to rally in Game 1, of course, but it was 23 points at the end of the third quarter in Game 2, which meant it was Sam Hauser time about 8 minutes into that game. So that's the biggest thing the Celtics know they have to fix. Like, how do we stop just laying a big fat egg every third quarter?
I'm not fully convinced that Sam Hauser's a real person, but I'm not convinced. Like, you can show me all the identification necessary. Can
I just say real quick? What's a great story that I'm not gonna have time to do that somebody should do is like, so the Celtics roll like 8 deep with guys that can really play, like really good players, maybe even 9 if you want to throw kind of Daniel Tice into that mix. He's getting minutes in this series. The last 4 guys, like, if you saw them walking down the street, you wouldn't know who they were. It's like
absolutely
Sam Hauser, Matt Ryan. I mean, just the one that looks like Zeller, like one of the Zellers, but he's not.
These are real life players.
Yeah.
It's like when you play a 2K season like out to 35. This is what happens. This is the real life version of that.
Well, it's like that Wahlberg movie, The Other Guys. It's like they're the other guys. They
actually have a hilarious story going on at all times. We just never get to see them because we're focused on The Rock and Sam Jackson. Like, that's what it is. Chris, like, I'm fascinated by the third quarter thing. I actually thought in Game 2, the Warriors had learned their lesson from Game 1 because the Celtics actually kind of fought back at the end of the third quarter in Game 1, right, to make it a little bit more manageable, and then they shoot out in the beginning of the fourth quarter, and now we've got a game. The Warriors seem to like, oh, no, we're not going to do this. Like, we're going to keep going. They push it to 20. Jordan Poole hits that ridiculous half-court shot, and then the first couple minutes, or the first, minute of the fourth quarter, Warriors go on like a 6-0 run because the Celtics were just still sloppy. Like, do you think the Celtics now, like, recognize, like, this whole winning the third quarter, like, you don't have to win the third quarter, you just have to, like, not be historically awful, right?
They absolutely realize that. Whether they can do anything about it remains to be seen. I mean, Golden State all season, the numbers say they're a great third quarter team, so it's kind of like, two things colliding that turn out bad for Boston. But look, they know they have to fix the third quarter. That's the obvious thing. But the turnovers just kill them. Every game they're in where they commit that many turnovers, 19 turnovers in Game 2, 33 points for Golden State. I mean, there's a straight line during these playoffs between high turnover games and losses. Like, it's just as simple as that. So if they can just stop drop kicking the ball around as often as they are, I mean, in the first quarter, you knew it was something bad was coming because there were a couple of times where, like, Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown just couldn't connect, and they were giving each other these kind of like perplexed, like hands up looks, like what does this happen? And so you knew that you were headed towards something of a sloppy game. But that's That's the big statistic for the Celtics. I mean, Ime, God love Ime. He's the most like honest, forthright coach I've ever covered.
He really is. Like, it's actually notable. I've never heard a guy. I can't remember the last time I heard a coach say some of the things that he's like. He'll just legitimately goes, "Yeah, that guy's not playing well, so we're going after him." Like, you don't hear that.
I think you also don't have a whole lot of coaches who have beat up an arena before, right? Like, so I think like when you get to that point, you just get to say whatever you want.
I talked to Ime about it this week, and we were kind of talking about where it comes from, and I'm like, did you get it from Pop? Like you cut your teeth as an assistant coach under Pop, who can be blunt at times. He's like, look, Pop probably gave me validation for doing it. Like, he made me believe I should do it, but this is just me. Like, I'm just a blunt guy, and I tell it how it is. And this isn't just like, I mean, I go back to when they were really struggling the first 2 months of the season. And I remember, and I do TV for NBC Sports in Boston, and I remember just sitting up there in the post-game show after Ime interviews, just being like, wow, like this guy's never going to survive. Like, he is straight napalming his team after losses, and that's just not going to go over well with a locker room. But it has, and that's why, to circle it back to the series, that's why I give the Celtics a good chance to respond, because they are so much more mentally tough this year than they were in years past. They have been able to bounce back from bad moments in these playoffs to win, and that's largely because of everything they've done during the regular season to get them to this point, to toughen them up in ways Ime has toughened them up.
The Warriors made some adjustments after game one. Draymond on Jaylen Brown was a show within itself. We could talk about that more in depth right after this. Gary Payton coming in to be intense at the point of attack. And it's really, like, for me, when I boil down the series, it's the Celtics defense and the fact that they can kind of slow down the Warriors, and the Warriors, depending on lineups, especially in game one, didn't seem like they could stop the Celtics when they needed to. And then the Celtics' iffy decision making on offense, which has been a bugaboo all season. What adjustments can Ime make going back to Boston for game three?
Well, I mean, now that he knows that Draymond is going to get a lot of those reps on Jaylen Brown, you can adjust accordingly. You've got to kind of mix that up and get Jaylen to more screens. Jaylen loves to kind of stare you down and go to the rim, and that's not a good strategy against Draymond. You can do it maybe against Andrew Wiggins and Klay Thompson and some of the guys that might be guarding him, but you've got to find ways to wriggle free and create some of those mismatches there. Al Horford was disappointing in game two as well. I think he only had his first bucket in the third quarter. You've got to find a way to get him more involved offensively. But, for Ime, and I know these Celtics, like, and what they're doing on the flight back today, like, they're just rewatching all these turnovers and being like, guys, 19 turnovers, 11 live ball turnovers. Like, those are the kind of turnovers that just kill you. So I think the biggest adjustment is just making sure you take care of the ball, because if they had taken care of the ball better in that third quarter, I don't know if it would have been a different outcome, because Golden State was so good in that period, but it would have certainly changed the whole dynamic of that game. So I know there are little things you do, but as much as basketball is about adjustments and it's about the nuances of it, don't turn the ball over. Like, that's kind of what it boils down to a lot. Don't turn the ball over.
If you're going to turn the ball over, throw it into the stands. Don't let them get a fast break opportunity, right? Like, just like.
I like that Ime like kind of reads from his own advanced stats, like at press conferences too. He's like 11 live ball turnovers. He's like, he has the stat sheet in front of him. Then like he's got his own stat sheet. He's like, he's giving up what his own coaches are kind of telling him. Like, don't do the 11 live ball turnovers and you won't lose quite as badly.
Chris, like, all I care about, honestly, is just the Draymond stuff. Like the Draymond, like him just coming out saying, "Yeah, I get special treatment. What of it? Like, that's how it should be. I've earned it, right?" Like, obviously, the Celtics are super frustrated by Draymond's behavior in game two. I also think it's a little funny where it's like, you've been playing with Marcus Smart all season, who's a brilliant instigator, and now it's like, yeah, this guy can like teach a college. And Draymond is like a masterclass, like TED Talk instigator level. And so how do they stop from like getting tricked by that stuff? Because they just felt like they got tricked in game two, because Draymond knows he's not going to get thrown out.
Yeah, I think it's just stop responding. And this goes back to a season-long problem the Celtics have had, not just with opponents, but referees too. Like, they allow referees and how the game is officiated to creep into their heads. Jason Tatum does it probably more than anybody. Marcus Smart ironically does it as much as anybody. They've got to find a way not to respond when Draymond kind of during dead ball situations, shoves an elbow into your chest or a forehead into your chest. Tatum got kind of sucked into that. Grant Williams kind of got sucked into that. My thing with Draymond, and I still can't believe this happened. Like, what is Marcus Smart doing pulling Draymond away from Jaylen Brown?
Let it go. Let that happen.
Go.
Yeah.
Let that happen.
Let him swing on him. Like,
exactly.
Just be like, yo, Draymond, he'd kick your ass right now. I bet you couldn't do anything to him. Like, you got to instigate that.
Like Jaylen, I'm sure Jaylen would have taken a punch for the team.
Absolutely.
He would have taken it and said, go. I mean, look, the referees discussed that for a little while. I'm sure it's, they'll never admit to it, but I'm sure they were thinking, we cannot call a double technical here. We absolutely cannot do it. But, if that had gone a couple steps further and Draymond had advanced on Jaylen Brown and shoved him again, they would have had no choice, and Draymond would have gotten tossed. So, I mean, Marcus, what do you of all people should know that you got to let that stuff go.
Ow! I want to tell you about the easiest and most fun way to spice up your season. It's Underdog Fantasy and their brand new Pick'em game. Just pick over or under your favorite or least favorite player stats, and you can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. You can set it and forget it. If that's the level of exertion that you want to put into your gambling, you just want to do it and forget about it, not think about it, you can do that. If you want to get intricate, you want to look at the stats, you want to really think about it, you can do that too. It's very easy for you, and that's why Underdog is great. Warriors Celtics Game 3 on Wednesday. How many rebounds will Robert Williams grab? How many points, rebounds, and assists will Jordan Poole total? Pick between 2 and 5 players, and you could win some cold hard cash. Use code Takeline. Get your first deposit doubled by the Underdog. They'll double it. Put in $50. They'll put in another $50 just because they like you. That's what they'll do. Up to $100. Sign up and play today. Woof woof. Social media and various commentators were to quote the I Think You Should Leave, brilliant Tim Robinson sketch show, I Think You Should Leave, we're quoting the sketch in which the character says, he admitted, when Steve Javie came out and said, what we do here is when somebody already has a tech, we keep that in mind, and that way we don't kick someone out on a soft tech. And people were kind of up in arms in this. Meanwhile, it feels like that's how we've always wanted postseason play to be reffed, is with a little bit of wisdom about, no one wants to see a player get kicked out. What's your opinion of Javie's take and the fact that Draymond really seems to understand how far he can go after that first take and that first tech rather, and really pushes it?
Javie doesn't really add anything to me. Like, he's never going to disagree with the referees.
Right. Ever, never going to do it.
Like, and even in I don't watch the NFL as closely as I do the NBA, but even the NFL, their unofficial refs, like they disagree at times with what the call is on the field. Like it's like a drinking game. Like, if Steve Javie doesn't disagree or agrees with the ref, take a shot. Like, it's just, I just don't I don't get any value out of kind of what he's doing unless he's going to find some way to disagree with the refs. The idea that Draymond gets special treatment, I just remember something Ron Artest told me, and I think he told other reporters this years ago, where he's like, early on in Ron's career, he kind of went out and just fouled everybody. Like, he was just like, he was being overly physical. So the referees at some point had to decide, do we call him for 6 fouls in 10 minutes, or do we start letting some of this stuff ultimately go? Draymond's kind of taken that track. And, I think his defensive credentials, his all-star credentials, his championship credentials, whether we like it or not, it has kind of given him more of a leash than, say, like, Daniel Tice has when he's out there. And that kind of, like, I don't mind it. I don't mind it. I think it comes with being a player of that caliber. I think there should be a limit to how far he can go. But I mean, giving Draymond the benefit of the doubt, that just happens when you're a star player. On the flip side of it, guys, like, I mean, Jason Tatum gets the benefit of the doubt sometimes on drives to the basket. Steph Curry gets the benefit of the doubt. It's just different types of benefits of the doubt that you get when you're a star player. Draymond gets to be more physical. Draymond gets to get away with screaming at referees. I mean, he doesn't talk to referees. He screams at referees. It's wild seeing him do that. But I guess that's what happens when you've reached the level Draymond has.
Well, Steve Javie would tell you, like, it's the way he screams that's just different because the referees aren't calling a technical foul.
I can't with Javie. I can't. I like Steve. But I can't with him. I can't. It's just like the second he comes on screen, I know it's going to be some kind of unabashed defense of what happened on the floor.
My favorite Steve Javie move is they bring him out, and the refs are deliberating. They're at the table, right, and they're looking at the play, and so they go to Steve Javie rather, and they ask him what his opinion of the call is and what it should be, and then Steve Javie just vamps until the call is made on the floor so that he can agree with it. Because the last thing he needs is to get boxed into an opinion that's immediately going to be overturned by the ref. So he's just like, what I like to do here is I'll look and I'll see, and then they'll call stands on the floor. Yeah, and I agree with that. That's the right call there. You want to keep it. It drives me fucking crazy.
He's no different. He's no different than a coach that wants another job immediately. It's on TV. Like, I remember seeing James. Well, I remember seeing James Borrego after he got let go in Charlotte on one of the ESPN shows, and like he was just pulling his punches every step of the way on some of this stuff. And I get it because Jimmy wants another job at some point in the NBA, so you can't just go napalming different teams. Like you're not going to get. What they need to find is the Stan Van Gundy of referees, someone that has no interest in ever working for the NBA ever again, and is perfectly happy calling out something awful.
God, it probably is Scott Foster once he's done, right? Scott Foster come in there, just blow it up, like just say like, F this guy. Oh,
that's really interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah. What would Scott Foster do? Because Scott has been given so many. Like, he gets all the great assignments. Like, he did really Game 7 of the conference finals, and he's doing a couple of finals games in this one. So, would Scott Foster, blow up the NBA by becoming the Stan of referee opinions? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
I wonder, because you mentioned that Ime is just such a blunt guy, right? I wonder, after Game 1, if you got him alone, if he's like, yes, like, we got what we wanted out of those possessions, right? With Derek White taking those threes, Marcus Smart taking those threes. I mean, Al Horford's a good shooter, but those other guys are very inconsistent. If he's like, yes, we're happy with that, because Jason Tatum made the right play in Game 1, right? He made the right passes, like even though he shot horribly, like his playmaking was fantastic. But those three shot 15 of 23 from deep, right? So I wonder if Ime would be like, I do actually think we need to adjust some of the way that goes. And then Game 2 is so ugly, I don't know how you even judge that because they just gave the ball away. But I wonder if Ime's actually comfortable with the shots that they got in Game 1.
No, I think he's real comfortable. It reminds me, before the series, I talked to some assistant coaches that went up against Golden State in these playoffs. And I was talking to some people in Dallas, and one of the things they said was like, look, we probably would have lost that series one way or the other, but we had so many wide open looks in these games that we just didn't make. And if we had made those shots, whether it were coming from Brunson or whoever else was open at that time, or Maxi Kleber, we would have been in a better position in this series. The Golden State defense, one of the things it does, whether by choice or by accident, is it leaves certain guys wide open, just wide open, and that's just kind of the way their defense is built. So, Derek White is not some lethal three-point shooter, but if he's wide open on the perimeter, you want him taking that shot. Al Horford is an improved three-point shooter this year from the last couple, but if he's wide open on the perimeter, you want him taking that shot. So I get the sense that they were thrilled with the shots that they were getting. Now, they weren't quite as open in Game 2, and that's a credit to Golden State's defense, but if they're there for them in Game 3, whether it's Horford, Grant Williams, Derek White, they want those guys shooting. The Warriors are going to keep throwing that junky defense at Jason Tatum. Keep trying to get into his head with a second defender kind of sliding over or behind him, doing all sorts of different things to kind of mess with him. Somebody is going to be open. And the Celtics, outside of like Robert Williams, they're built to have guys shoot that shot, including Daniel Tice, who made up, I think, one or two in Game 1. So I think they're happy with the shots that they've been getting.
You mentioned Robert, and his play has been so instrumental over the course of this regular season in catalyzing the Celtics and allowing them to turn from a up and down team to a, really one of the best teams that we've seen in the NBA recently since January. He obviously he's been dealing with injury all postseason, and he looked really labored at times in Game 2. Any Any sense on where he'll be for Game 3? If he'll be available, what his status is?
I think he'll be available, but he's laboring. Look, he came back from knee surgery after a month. Like, that's legitimate. He came back from knee surgery. And look, in hindsight, and it is kind of Monday morning quarterbacking, maybe they should have kept him out of the first 2 games of that Brooklyn series. They were up 2-0, or the last 2 games, they're up 2-0, and it really wasn't a huge need to bring him back in that Game 3, but that's, of course, hindsight. He's not going to get any better. Like, it's just not going to happen. He's going to be able to give them whatever he can give them over 20-ish minutes, and that's the best you can do. And look, I think it's remarkable that he is able to do that. One of the things, to bring it back to Ime, so Robert Williams in recent years has had something of a reputation of not being willing to play through pain. Like, it was just there. Like, people talked about it in Boston, ankle sprain, knee soreness. He was out for long stretches. It's why that contract for a player of his talent seems so manageable, because they didn't know how long he was going to be able to play. Ime from training camp on found 700 different ways to call Robert Williams soft. Like, he did. He kept saying things like Robert's got to be tougher, got to play. Even when you weren't asking about Robert Williams' pain tolerance, Ime would bring up Robert Williams playing through pain. He would find a way to weave that into a discussion about Robert Williams. So, and look, I think that paid off. I mean, I talked to Rob about this early in the series, and he's like, yeah, Ime questioned my toughness over and over again, early on, and that has an effect on you. So, Robert Williams being questioned early on has kind of put him in this position where, even though he's probably 70% of the player that he is at his best, he's still able and willing to go out there and give them 20 minutes. And look, he's effective in that time. He had a couple of blocked shots. He's not as physical and as strong with his lower body as he could be, but he's still a presence that you have to account for if you're Golden State when you go to the rim.
Yeah, it's crazy how he's a gamer now, right? He just is he's a guy that Marcus Smart fell into his knee last night, and he gets up slowly, he limps up the floor, he's like, I'm okay. He might have blocked a shot on the next play, or he had a good defensive play or something, and it is just out of character from what you heard about him leading up to the season. But I do wonder, look, if they win a championship, I guess it's going to be worth it. But I especially with young players, the idea of rushing them back from that meniscus tear, and maybe he ends up being fine, and maybe I'm just being a wuss about it. But I fear for the future of his career based on that quick, like you said, a month after knee surgery. They didn't just clean it up. They removed part of the meniscus. That's just crazy to me.
Yeah, it's definitely a concern long term. I don't think the Celtics or Robert Williams' team would have done the procedure if they weren't sure it was going to be safe for them in the long term. I mean, it does help that he has a long-term contract. I mean, that certainly helps. If he was going to be a free agent, we might be having a different conversation. But I wonder, every time I see him dragging that leg, I wonder if this is is he further injuring it? Is he going to have another surgery this offseason that's more significant that might keep him out for the first couple of months of next season? The Celtics say no, that it's just a matter of playing through pain, but I mean, he is literally a game time decision every single day. Yeah. Every single game, he's a game time decision. And that tells me that knee still has some problems.
He is Chris Mannix, Sports Illustrated writer and host of the Crossover NBA show. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been great.
Anytime, guys.
Thanks, Chris.